Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of BreathTalks. And I am super excited today to introduce to you Andrea Foulkes, whom back in the early 2000s, I remember watching. It was Good Morning. Was it Good Morning Britain?
2004, yeah.
2004. Good Morning Britain or?
This morning.
This morning. And Andrea had a show on taking celebrities back to past lives on mainstream television. It was fantastic. And, you know, you've done so much else, and I'll let you sort of talk about what else you've been doing. Because
thank you, Ciaria. Yeah. It was like that wrinkle in time where you were allowed. I mean, I started off on This Morning on ITV. For people who don't know what that is, it's, if they're in America, it's like Good Morning America. So I was the expert on there, taking celebrities back to past lives for nearly a year every Wednesday until they made me my own show. And then I did 2 series of this show, taking celebrities back to past lives. But I was always wanting to show the healing aspect, whereas they were more interested in, can we prove reincarnation exists? Have people reincarnated? And we had this detective thing. But sometimes they did let me show inner child. I think they let me show inner child healing once and spirit releasement twice.
Wow, fantastic.
It's really far out for mainstream TV. And then they went, no more. But what I do in private practice is, you know, I see private clients in person, or I work with people on Skype or the phone, because I don't need to see people, but I'm going into the emotional Akashic records. That's what I do over the internet. But in person, I mean, part of that does include what I do in person, which is past life regression, inner child healing, ancestral timeline healing, spirit releasement, and working with light language codes. Since 2011, I've spoken light language as well.
Fantastic. Wow. So the reason I'm really interested in the work that you've been doing with clients, because it does parallel, you know, some of the situations we encounter in breathwork sessions. And you posted recently about a client in Ireland.
Yes, because you asked me about that. Yeah, I've had quite a few clients in Ireland with this specific kind of thing, which is, I went through a little phase of, it starts with one person and then other people are in a similar situation. And as far as I'm aware, I don't know the law right now as of the 23rd of February 2022, but in general, probably the last person I had was probably 2 years ago. So I don't know in the last 2 years if the law's changed. But as I understood it then, if you were pregnant and you went over your due date by 2 weeks, you had to have a C-section. Now, I attracted a lot of women as clients who were like, I don't want to have a C-section. You know, I want to give birth naturally, as in when the baby wants to come. But I'm getting panicky now because I'm getting near over the due date, and I've got like another few days before I'm supposed to have this C-section if the baby doesn't arrive. So a lot of the women I attracted were used to doing meditation or breath work or some kind of inner awareness. I don't know how successful it would be with somebody who, we don't like the word 3D, but someone who has no awareness of any of this stuff, whether it would be that easy for them. Yeah. Because most of these women that I helped were just doing an hour session or half an hour session. So what was happening was they were doing the session with me. And it was funny because the other day, this client of mine said, oh, here's my daughter that you helped birth. You know,
fantastic.
And from my perspective, I was like, oh my God, that's so beautiful. Because I didn't feel that I wasn't a doula. I'm not a midwife, but I worked with these ladies who were pregnant and why the baby wasn't dropping into the birth canal, you know, why they were not going into labor. So I would go into using my skills in reading the emotional Akashic records. I was weaving between the story of the baby linked to the mother, and then the story of the baby and the mother linked to the father. And then if there were any siblings or other important family members involved very closely, like say they lived with the grandparents or something, I would weave into the story of why the baby was not feeling ready to come to earth. And so what would happen over all these women that I worked with over quite a few years really, was they'd all tell the same thing. Within usually a few hours, they'd go into labor.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So they were just resolving the emotional issues, and they weren't all the same. You know, obviously sometimes it was more based on the baby, sometimes it was based more on the baby's relationship with the partner, or the sibling that was going to be their sibling. But obviously the mother was the key one, because she's the one holding the baby in her womb, and she's got to resolve this for the baby to totally feel safe to come to earth.
Wow. You see, the thing with cesarean and induced births is that the power to be born is being taken away from the infant, and then they actually submit to authority a lot more. And so, do you think the governments know this?
Yeah. And the thing, I mean, it's such a complex subject, because I've ran retreats where, you know, we've talked about all this, and then, you know, and I've posted about this over the years. So I don't want people to feel like, oh my God, you know, I had to have a C-section, because women get very defensive. And usually what you find is there's a lot of guilt, unless it was an elective C-section, and that's where their consciousness is at, and that's what they chose. But a lot of women hold a lot of guilt around it, that they couldn't birth naturally. And so in workshops, I've seen women, you know, crying, processing this trauma of why they couldn't birth properly. And often it's sometimes it's a fear of birthing as well. You know, maybe in what I do, there's a past life where they died in childbirth. So you get that. And then also what you do, the breath work ties in, is, you know, on a broader perspective, it would be wonderful if you got women who say, I'm not pregnant yet, I've met the partner I'd like to have a baby with, and then you can help them with conscious conception, conscious birthing.
Exactly. We recommend that the mother and the father both go through 10 sessions to resolve their own birth trauma, because it has been proven that trauma passes through.
Because a lot of women, is that what they say in breathworks? Because from my perspective, if you haven't cleared your own birth, you will relive it when you give birth.
Exactly.
And if there was a trauma, then that's going to come up, and you're not in that moment of trying to give birth able to necessarily resolve it. It's all got to be resolved. And I think women don't realize, you know, when they hear about orgasmic births, and, you know, there's the great, I think it's still out there. It was a film with
Birth into Being.
Yes, but I loved Birth into Being. But you have to prepare your emotional, mental, and physical body.
Yes.
You know,
and no matter what, you know, some women have the best of intentions, set up a birth plan, and it all goes haywire at the last minute because, you know, it wasn't meant to be. And then just go and get some help with dealing with it.
Yeah. And then I think one of the other things that perhaps comes up in breath work that you do is that I think they've stopped doing it so much now, but they used to cut the umbilical cord too soon. Yeah, and then you have lotus births, which must be even more amazing for your breath, because if you cut the umbilical cord too soon, you're going to panic to breathe, and then you'll never, which is most of the population, isn't it? We don't breathe properly because we've had to, our first breath of life has been a panic. It wasn't in our own time, whereas a lotus birth is where you keep the umbilical cord attached to the placenta. So you give birth to the baby, and then in general, the placenta's born 45 minutes or an hour later, isn't it? And you keep the baby and the placenta, you don't cut them. So then you put the herbs in the basket with the placenta, and, you know, the placenta will shrivel up and over a few days, and then the baby is entering this world and leaving the placenta world. in its own time. So that the breath of that child, I can't imagine. I mean, having not met children who go, yeah, I was born as a lotus birth, I would love to see how their breath is.
It is different. It is very different, because, you know, that's when your spirit fully comes into your body. And like you said, that first breath is so incredibly important. And we help people resolve the trauma associated with the first breath. And, you know, people in sessions go blue because they're not breathing. And then in the old days, you were turned upside down and spanked until you breathed. So yeah, there's a lot there. But you also mentioned, and people will go into past lives in sessions, in breathwork sessions, and the healing from past life memories is so incredibly important. And you had a few good examples.
Yeah, I mean, I've had experiences where clients, I mean, this is a male client, and he'd had pains in his stomach from, and see, what people don't realize with past life regression is not all past lives are yours. You know, I've been doing this work 22 years, so not all past lives are yours. But you can get to either an event, so you can get to an age which will trigger a cell memory of a past life. So this guy was saying, I was fine till I got to 30. And then all of a sudden these pains started in my stomach and nobody knew where they came from. You know, I'd seen doctors and nobody could resolve it. So he did a session with me, and it turned that it was linked to being a prostitute in a past life who'd got pregnant and had a miscarriage. And in the birthing process of the miscarriage, the trauma of that miscarriage had stayed with him, even though he was a male in this lifetime. So when he got to 30 in this lifetime, which was the same age he was in that lifetime, he manifested the pains in his bodies. And as soon as, you know, and it was quite amusing, because, you know, here you are in this lifetime and the guy's going like he's giving birth in the past life. And of course, if it's too traumatic a past life, you always take somebody outside the body so they look at it as a detached observer. But it is quite amusing to see a man giving birth in this lifetime, but in a past life as a woman, you know, being the opposite gender. But the minute we resolved it, and you take them to the last day of that lifetime and you resolve that lifetime, you know, you're not a woman in this lifetime, you don't need to hold the afflictions of that lifetime. What did you learn? What regrets do you have? Release it. The physical body will usually follow the resolution of the emotional story. Yeah.
And release the energy trapped. Exactly. Yeah. Fantastic.
And the pains can go straight away. Like another person I had once, she came to see me and her head was like this. And we went into, and that wasn't actually linked to past lives. That was linked to having entities attached who'd hung themselves. And so when we released that, you know, her neck just straightened up straight away.
Fantastic.
And then I'm sure you come across the ones with squeaky voices.
Yeah.
You know, like you see this adult, and then out of their mouth comes this child's voice. And where has this come from? Usually it's a trauma, you know, could be past life, but sometimes it's inner child trauma, because a lot of what I do is inner child. So it's going back to when the voice got trapped, you know, so they still have the voice of the child, even though they might be 50, they're still speaking like a child. And it, you know, you will get a lot further just even in your career and everything, if you can speak as an adult. You know, it doesn't matter how intelligent or talented you are, if you open your mouth and out of it comes, oh, hello, you know, a child, isn't it? It's not going to be helpful. And often, even if they don't have a squeaky child's voice, a lot of clients, I can tell that this is not the full spectrum of their voice. You know, there are octaves within their voice that they need to heal to be able to speak properly.
And I had a client once who went to grammar school, and his form master used to touch him up. So he made himself effeminate. So he wasn't attractive to men that were attracted to boys. And, you know, his voice would be very like this. And I'm like, so I got him doing the haka. And I said, come on, let's see your masculine. And you can fight, you can like send anyone away with that.
And also I get people to do, you know,
yeah.
People are so frightened of making noise. They can't give themselves permission sometimes to make noise, and yet making noise is so powerful in your healing process. Because I speak light language, as a child my mum said I couldn't sing, but actually now part of what I do is sound healing with my voice. And a lady the other night said to me, oh, you can hit the keys above a soprano. But that's because I've had to heal my throat. You know, I got mugged and strangled in this lifetime. And that took some of my throat chakra out. So I had to heal that because I was on thyroxine. And I think a lot of people have underactive thyroid because of trauma to the throat, trauma to breath. You know, there's so much to do with this breathing.
Exactly. And you actually gave me a wonderful light language session in your allotment down in Glastonbury. It was a beautiful summer day, and you know, it was so divine. Absolutely.
Thank you. The light language lives on. I've given up the allotment though.
Oh, okay.
That was hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, but light language is so powerful and resonant. And then when you do it I love to do it in cathedrals as well, that's real, but people just start crying. You know, it's such a healing, powerful, because you're ungrading the dormant DNA codes. And finding our authentic voices. And I look back at videos of myself regressing people back in 2004, and my voice was squeaky, and I think there were energies coming in, malevolent energies hijacking my throat chakra, because I hadn't totally healed the trauma of being mugged and strangled at that point. And I've worked a lot on my throat now and took myself off thyroxine after being on it for 16 years. I've probably been off it. It's hard to say because we've lost 2 years. I've probably been off it 5 or 6 years now from, you know, being on thyroxine for all those years. But I think that suppresses your throat chakra as well. And of course, you can't take yourself off medication unless you know what you're doing and you seek professional help and guidance of whether that's right for you. Because it's not right for everybody. And it depends what your dose is and what you're on. But for me, it felt like at the time the right thing to do. But a lot of fear came up, a lot of fear.
I can imagine. So you live in the wonderful Glastonbury environment, you know, the area there. And yesterday was quite an important portal day, wasn't it? So how did you find it?
I felt really, well, I think what happened to a lot of people happened to me as well. I woke up and I felt really good, like, oh, 22 energy. I was born on the 22nd. I loved the 22nd. I went to the Chalice Well, had a lovely time there. I met another lady whose birthday is the same day as mine. And then as the day went on, by the time it got to the evening, I was crying and sobbing. And I spoke to a friend in America and she said, oh, I feel all this grief coming up. And then I went in a spiritual group on Facebook and I saw all these other people saying, I'm feeling all this grief coming up. So I think a lot of emotion came up energetically for people.
I got that actually this morning. The grief. Yeah. So the 22nd of the 2nd, 22.
Yeah.
A phenomenal day for
and I think numerology is powerful. And you know, you're in a powerful place. You're in Ireland, which is really powerful in the history books, because
the west of Ireland has very feminine goddess energy, and the land really holds you here. You know, it really is a wonderful place.
Because I think that's why they've tried to almost make the Irish look like, they've tried to turn them into cartoon caricatures, kind of, because I think because of the energy that the Stargate portals in Ireland own, because the ancient Egyptians would go to Ireland either energetically or physically to to leave through the, and back in the day they had access to the 9 dimensions. Now it might be opened up more, but I think that's what's happening.
I mean, the monks had coined the term thin places, where you walk between the worlds. You know, even the monks could feel it.
I didn't know the monks called it that.
That the early Christian monks. And so when you go to St. Michael's, Skellig Michael, you see the beehive huts, and they'd be in meditation and, you know, in the highly energetic places. So yes. Well, Andrea, thank you so much. Now, how can people get hold of you?
Oh, well, they can download a free meditation on my website if they want, which is a gorgeous earth peace meditation, because I think if we all do this earth meditation, which helps, we're living portals, so this energy's got to come through us as the toroidal energy field and heal that. So that's on my website, which is andreafoulkes.com, which is AndreaFoulkes.com. I love Facebook. I have a YouTube channel with loads of free videos and light languages there as reference for people as well, though.
And you give lots of remote sessions to people.
I do. I mean, I think I've been so busy this year. I think I've never been so busy.
Great.
Working with people all over the world. I've bizarrely been working a lot with people in Canada, America, and Australia and Switzerland this last probably 6 weeks, a lot really. So I work doing the emotional Akashic records. They don't need to look at me, because my belief is if you look, we can use, I use Skype. I like the medium of Skype, but if you look at me, you're not going to drop into your emotional self. So it's easier to drop into your emotional self when you don't have to look at me. So although we use that, we just use the audio, and a lot of clients go, oh, I get why you don't use the video like 10 minutes because they're crying and releasing things. So I think it's quite powerful to have that choice to not have to look at people.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been fantastic.
You're very welcome.
Okay.